All right, cool, everyone. Welcome to this webinar of the BD School. Today, we're going to talk about 5 effective tactics to master your time. So we're going to be talking about time management. For those of you who don't know me, although today that should not be the case, but just a little introduction. I'm Lucia, I'm the founder of the BD School, and we are the leading educational platform entirely dedicated to business development. We are on a mission. Our vision is to create the next generation of business development pros using the power of knowledge, because we believe that when people have the knowledge, the tools, the information, then they can actually build something amazing careers and be successful. The way we do it is in 3 ways. So we provide a lot of free content, just like this one that you're watching today. We also provide courses. You will see a link to that in a moment. And we also provide one-on-one coaching. So we basically like to tailor our learning options to the needs and preferences of all of you. So if you want to increase and improve your business development skills, you can check our website, thebdschool.com, and see all what we have to offer in terms of BD knowledge. That is it for the introductions. Now let's move on to the topic of today, which is time management. So we're going to be talking a little bit about time management. We're going to try to frame it in an effective and practical way. And then we're going to talk about 5 effective tactics for time management, and I will share a few resources that you can use, read, watch, tools that can help you to become better at time management. Good. Now, if you're here or if you signed up for this webinar, or if you're watching it on YouTube, it means one of these things, or at least you said one of these things in the last a few weeks. Maybe you feel very overwhelmed by tasks. I know that that's been my case. I've had a very intensive summer, not super focused on work. So going back was really tough to, just refocus and make sure that I would be really 100% focused on my job. The other thing you might be experiencing is that you can't really focus. Maybe there are too many distractions, personal life, professional lives, anything in between. Or maybe you feel like you're rushing a lot to meet deadlines. We're also approaching the end of the year. It's September 2024, so just a few months left to achieve our goals, and that can feel a little bit stressful. You might feel a little bit burnout from trying to juggling all the tasks that we do in business development, entrepreneurship in general. Or you might even be feeling a little bit of, stuck in a rut of procrastination and / panic, right? Especially when you don't manage to reach your targets. And that's the last point, right? So maybe you feel guilty because you feel like you're not getting enough things done. Now, all these things, they can happen at any point in our careers, but for business developers, it is quite common, really due to the nature of what we do, right? So in every day-to-day job, we face a lot of rejections. We have a lot of different tasks that we have to do and we have to perform, a lot of pressure in terms also of results, right? We want to do well. We want to make sure that we generate value for our company. Now, all these things are very common, and the good news is that we can get out of it. And not only we can, but we definitely should, because if we feel so stressed about work, we might actually be lacking or let's say struggle to reach our usual performances. There's actually been many studies on this topic, so really the relation between stress and performance. As we can see from this graph, let's say a little bit of stress is good. Actually, not having stress at all is not good for our performance, because that's the moment in which we feel bored, we don't feel motivated, right? So we don't really see the purpose on what we're doing. On the other hand, if we have too much stress, our performance is naturally going to decrease. So our job, of course, is to make sure that we keep this healthy level of stress, but that we do it in a smart way, right? So we still want to reach our goals, we want to reduce the stress level, and we want to make sure that we can increase our performance at the same time. That's pretty much what we want to do today by sharing a little bit more in terms of time management, how we can optimize our time, because what happens sometimes is that all this feeling of overwhelm, of stress, of not being able to reach our goals and so on, it really comes from the fact that we are not managing our time properly. Now, as I mentioned, this summer was very busy for me. I actually just got married, so it was a very intensive period personally, right? Now, of course, I loved the feeling. I loved spending time with my family and friends and so on, but getting back to work was really a struggle. the main problem, though, was that I was not being disciplined enough with my time management, right? Now, I use some of the techniques that we're going to share today and a lot more. But the main problem was I just really lacked the motivation to do these things. So at the end of the day, having all these amazing tactics for time management and so on was not that helpful, right? As long as I didn't put myself to it and really shifted my mindset and started working again and really refocus on my job. So our mission today is to be able to reduce the stress through time management and to do so in a way that can really be applied to our day-to-day life. So it shouldn't be too complicated. It should be just things like little optimizations that we can integrate in our day-to-day life so that we can over time reduce stress. Now, what is time management? I always, if you follow our webinars, you probably noticed that I always love to start with definitions because I think definitions are very important, right? Especially now in our case, we're very international at the moment. We have just in one session very many different nationalities. We have Brazil, Mexico, but living in Belgium, in the UK, half Spanish, I'm Italian. Now, sometimes the definitions can change, right? Especially if we speak multiple languages and so on. So it's important to really get down to what it is, this time management. And I really like this definition, which is not just the usual wired processes to, structure our time and so on. But I like to see time management as a form of decision-making, right? That we use to structure our time, to protect our time, and then to adapt as well to all the different changing conditions. And I like to look at time management as a form of decision-making because then it gives us really the whole power over our time, right? So from the moment we say this is how we decide to use our time and how we allocate it, then we have full control over our schedule, which also means, if we're disciplined enough, over our stress levels. Now, time management, and here after I will also link all the sources that we use. We try to be as scientific as possible because as I was talking about time management, I said, well, okay, yet again, another webinar about time management. There are so many books, webinars, and so on, but does it even work, right? So all this buzz around time management, does it actually help us to be more performant? Now, luckily, the scientists did their job and they found out that there is actually a positive correlation between time management and then performing better at work, achieving success in terms of university, for example, academic achievement, life satisfaction, happiness, reducing stress, and in general, work-life balance. So it looks like all our problems stem from having poor time management. And if we go to fix that, maybe we can achieve all these other cool things that we all crave, so job performance and so on. Now, there is one little piece of fact that I found, which maybe all of us know actually unconsciously, but we don't really stop to think about it. Now, your attitude to time management, of course, is going to be personal to you, it's going to be personal to me and so on. But depending on where you were born, where you were raised, you might actually have a different attitude to time management. Now, in general, we can have two main ways of perceiving time, let's say, which could be monochronic or polychronic. Now, monochronic attitude towards time, it's, let's say, the typical attitude of northern countries, Germany, Sweden, also US, Canada, the Netherlands, where I'm based. Now, monochronic means that basically we see at time as a precious resource, first of all, that needs to be optimized. And in order to do that, we tend to focus on one task only, and we tend to be a lot more task-oriented, right? So we tend to do just one thing at a time. We tend to be very structured. Our agenda is sacred. So if there is a meeting started at 3 p.m., we are there at 3 p.m., not 3:01, not 2:59, we're there at 3. We are very scheduled. One thing, for example, that, well, I'm Italian and I live in the Netherlands for about 10 years. And one thing that I found shocking at the beginning was the fact that I was never managing to meet my Dutch friends because they had their plans scheduled in advance, sometimes 2-3 months in advance, right? While I like a bit more spontaneity, right? So I like to be just, okay, well, let's see what we can do tonight, right? So that for me was a bit of a cultural shock. The other thing is that monochronic societies or monochronic people tend to be more task-oriented, and they tend to be punctual. Now, this tends to be more in the north part of the world. Now, for all of us, and I think it's the few of us here today, it's more a polychronic attitude towards time, because it's more typical from Southern culture. Italy, for example, Spain, Saudi Arabia, also many cultures in Asia and so on, they tend to have an attitude which we can call polychronic. This is characterized by multitasking. That is something that is very common. I love multitasking, even though I know that it's not efficient, but I still do it. I can't really prevent myself. We tend to be more flexible with time, so we're not so structured. You know, let's say you're working from home, and then someone comes over, and well, that's okay. You can have a coffee with that person. You can go back to work later. Now, this is because polychronic cultures, they tend to see life as you know, anything can happen, right? So you can schedule, you can plan, and so on. But at the end of the day, you need a little bit of flexibility, right? And we tend to be more receptive to everything that's happening around us. We have a more fluid concept of time. We are a lot more focused on relationships. Now, for example, if you're doing business with some Italians, and you probably did, well, I know for sure that you, Marcia, were there in Italy last week. Now, in Italy, we love to build relationships, which means even if we're in a business setting, we don't like to just go directly and do business. We love to build a relationship first. We're going to go for lunch, maybe a very long lunch, right? And then maybe at the end, we're going to talk about business. And last, polychronic attitudes towards time. Again, we tend to be more adaptable, right? So maybe we're not super punctual. I remember we did some trainings in Saudi Arabia, and I was a little bit shocked because people were not arriving on time, you know? And although I'm Italian, I do share this aspect of punctuality with monochronic. I was like, what is happening? And then someone at the training told me, don't worry, it's not you. It's just, it works like that, you know, so embrace it. So I did embrace it, and I actually loved it because it is more on my chords. Now, I wanted to share all this because I think it's important also to recognize your own attitude to time, right? So are you more inclined to be tasking, structured, scheduled, and so on, or not? Because at the end of the day, all the tactics we're going to talk about today, but also all the other million time management tactics you're going to find online, they're only going to work if you manage to apply them to your own style, right? So it is important to be conscious of that. So I hope that helps you with that. Now, let's do a little quiz. You can just write in the chat what is going to be your answer. Now, my question is, do you think that people are more productive on a very nice, sunny day, or on a very bad day, gray, rainy, a little bit what we have here in Rotterdam today? Jessica, Marcia, what do you think? So is it, when are people more productive?
In a rainy day, I would say.
All right, Marcia, about you?
Yes, I think as well. Yes.
All right. Do you
But
want to
I think it
elaborate?
depends. Yeah, I think it depends on the mood, because sometimes the gray weather puts you in a bad mood, and that also might not help with productivity. So depends, I think.
All right, cool. And Jessica, why do you think people are more productive on rainy days? What is your explanation?
Well, I live in Belgium, and compared to Spain, for example, in which people tend to be more social, as you were saying, going out, relating to people. Here in Belgium, I'm always amazed. Like the kids and teenagers, they may play an instrument, do sports, be in this club and the other, and it's like, wow, where do you have time to do all this? And it's because they have scheduled activities. Because of the weather, they cannot socialize spontaneously.
Yeah, totally, totally. So these are two very good points. And surprisingly, we're both right, because I did the same test yesterday to my husband, and he mentioned sunny weather. You were actually both right. So people tend to be more productive when it's bad weather outside. But the reason is because when it's bad weather, we are not busy, or we are not distracted by thinking, oh, it's a nice weather. I could be out, I could go swimming, I could go to a park, I could do this, I could do that, right? So eventually, indeed, bad weather incentivizes productivity. That is also why maybe, again, I'm based in the Netherlands and it seems to be a very productive society, right? So maybe that's because we have more bad days than good days. But this little quiz was a little bit of a bridge to bring us to another topic, which is strictly related to time management, and maybe even more important than time management, which is actually attention management. Now, obviously, we all know, so, and probably, well, I hope not, you're not multitasking at the moment, but I know that I do that all the time. So I don't manage to just be focused on one task. There is really just too many stimuli all the time. There is something happening all the time, and it's really difficult to just keep focus. So actually managing our time really passes through managing our attention. And there are a few things that really can hinder our attention, especially in this day and age. Obviously, we all know we have phones, we have YouTube. So we live in a society where we can do so many things at the same time, which was just simply not possible even just a few years ago, right? So we really have to pay attention to these enemies of our attention. Now, the first one is interruptions. Now, whenever we get interrupted doing something, our brain simply can't process these informations fast enough. It actually, based on studies, it takes about 23 minutes for our brain to go and from one task to another, really to refocus after it has been interrupted. So we need to be extremely mindful of the interruptions that can happen around us all the time. So we should really pay attention to that, for example, by putting away our phone, maybe blocking our screen so we can only do one thing at the time, and so on. The other thing is information overload. Now, when we just joined the session, I was telling to Marcia and Jessica that I found so much information about time management, and we really wanted to find something that was a little bit more scientific, based on data and so on. But there was so much to talk about and so much to just, put everything in 1 hour. Now, information overload can be really draining for us humans because it really blocks us, right? So if we are working on a new project, maybe we're doing a market research for a new product that we're launching, or we're launching to another country. Now, we start and we find the attitudes, and we find the laws, and we find this, and we find that. And for each one of these topics, we can go more and more and more in depth, and there will be reports, and there will be AI that can help us with that, right? So at the end of the day, we're going to be just researching. We have all these millions of information, and we're stuck, and we wasted a lot of time. That's why I always say to all our students when they come to the training, I always tell them that research is extremely important in BD. We cannot be possibly effective without researching, without knowing what's happening around us. But we should not hide ourselves behind let's say, the finger of the research, right? Why? Because at the end of the day, we also have to do things, right? And because there is so much information available, we're going to get stuck at some point. So we need to limit the information to a few sources and make sure that the information we find can help us to at least move forward, right? Then there is always time to go deeper and really get more into the topic if you're really into it. Then there is social interactions overload, right? Now, back in the days, you wouldn't say, but I'm 35 already. So I remember the world without social media and phones. And so I was actually highly against having a smartphone until I was 25. And then my friends got me one. But back in the days, we just didn't have all these social interactions, right? So maybe we'd have the friend calling us at 8 p.m. It's like, hey, is Lucia at home? Like, can I have her on the phone? And that was pretty much it. And then you would see people outside. But nowadays, you can be talking to everyone at every moment of the day, and everybody can contact you at every moment of the day, right? You just have to go on Instagram, you just have to go on Facebook, and so on and so forth. Usually, over a span of my waking hours, I am constantly talking to people. Now, obviously, for work reasons, but if I'm not talking to someone for work, I'm probably talking to my mom, I'm talking to my cousin, I'm talking to my sister, I'm talking to my husband. It's constant, right? This removes a lot of attention. And the more attention we remove, the more difficult it is for our brain to just process what's happening, right? So at some point, it's going to be like, you have to slow down. So we need to stop because we just can't process all these things, which means, again, everything we're going to do is going to take a lot longer time. And that's why then we don't achieve our goals, right? I know that if I would be talking less to my family, probably I would get more done. But as I said, I'm Italian, I do like that. Context switching. Context switching, sorry, today with these words, I'm not really able to articulate. Context switching. Now, what does that mean, right? So if we are doing different tasks, right? So I started by saying I'm a multitasker myself. I find it boring to do always the same thing. So I'm always switching tasks. The problem is, once again, our brain is not able to do two things at the same time. They're just actually a very small percentage of the population, which is called supertaskers, which are basically multitaskers on steroids. Again, these are very few people that have been studied, and it has been shown that the brain can function, can do multiple things at the same time. But for all of us normal people, that is very detrimental because our brain can process doing different things at the same time. And every time you switch context, let's say, for example, now we're doing prospecting. Okay, great. I'm writing this personalized email, and then I receive a notification on LinkedIn. Maybe someone commented on my post. Oh, great. I'm going to go comment on that post because it's super important. Like, I don't want to make them wait. It takes 2 minutes. What is that? The point is, you're going to be doing two very different tasks, right? So your brain can't possibly go from one to the other in a timely manner, right? So in a way that actually allows you to actually finish your tasks and make sure that you reach your goals. So we need to pay attention to that as well. And then again, multitasking, right? So doing multiple things at a time, although I like to say that I am a multitasker, I do know that if I would just do one thing at a time, and that is usually when I do one thing at a time, I am a lot more productive. I am a lot more efficient. I'm a lot more effective, meaning I do get my goals. So if I focus only on that one thing. So we need to pay attention to all these things because they're really around the corner all the time. And sometimes on a daily basis, we don't really see or perceive the effect. Typically, we see that at the end of the month, at the quarter of the year, when we didn't reach our goals, or like it's, let's say, June, and you spent already 6 months and you're like 30% on your target. That is not good, right? So we don't want to arrive stressed to December. Now, all these things actually accumulated on average cost you 40% in terms of productivity. So if you're constantly going on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on this, or then you have 1,000 tabs open, guilty as charged, we're actually all losing on average 40% in productivity, which is insane, right? Because if we would just be focused on what we're doing, we can free up a lot of time that we can dedicate to other things we like to do, right? For example, I love playing tennis. And on days like this one, for example, I know I can't do it because I have a webinar and then I have a training and then I have a call and so on. So I can't possibly fit also tennis today. However, if I did prepare the webinar earlier, like it was planned, I would have had actually this morning to go. But because I didn't, and I had to finish the slides for today and finish to learn all these new things, I did actually lose out on the opportunity of going to play tennis, which is something I really enjoy. So if we manage to remove all these distractions and really focus our time, we can gain back this 40% in productivity. And now, all this being said, let's get to the actual tactics that we can implement in our day. Before we get into that, though, I want to be super clear that this is not like a magic formula or something like that. Personally, I tried like all the techniques, like time management techniques, all of them, Pomodoro technique, Eisenhower matrix, time blocking, tracking, microtasking, all of them. And they did work for a while, right? Except that then I would get bored, or simply my priorities would change. I would add, new roles and so on. So those things were just not effective anymore. So take these as a chance, to explore these techniques. But more than explore these techniques is really explore your own time management style, right? And really try to find something that works for you, right? So don't just get stuck on one thing because you read it online. Try to find your own way of managing your time. And if you want to do that well, you have to keep in mind this time management wheel, because at the end of the day, when we're talking about time management, sometimes I feel that it's just about, okay, I have my tasks, I have to put them in a calendar. It's not really about that. Actually, managing your time involves a lot of other steps before you can actually plan something and put something on your calendar. It starts by prioritizing your tasks. And this, I don't know you, but personally, I find it the most challenging step, right? Because sometimes, let's say if I'm doing something that I did like very long time, for example, preparing a webinar, right? I love preparing webinars because it gives me the chance to always learn something new and so on. But at the very beginning, when we started doing webinars and so on, I had absolutely no clue of how much time it was going to take how much time it was going to take us to prepare the slides and actually learn about these topics and do all the marketing around the webinar and so on. So it was really difficult to prioritize and say, okay, what do we do first? So how do we structure that? So you need to take some time before you put anything on your calendar to really evaluate your tasks and decide what it is that needs to be done first. Now, if you work for a company, easy. Maybe you have a good manager. The manager tells you what to do. I love that personally. I love being an entrepreneur, but I also really liked when I had to-do list that was pre-made for me, right? It removed a lot of pressure and it removed a lot of decision-making power. But the prioritization aspect is one of the most important in time management. If you don't know what needs to be done, you can possibly continue. Once you know what needs to be done, and the needs to be done is urgent, is important, must be done in a timely manner, then you can start planning, right? Because maybe, so once you have your task list, you're going to find a lot of things that need to be done. Let's say today you have to follow up with the partner, they're waiting for you. It's something that needs to be done urgently, needs to be done now. But maybe you also know that you want to go to a conference in November, and you just have to plan it on your calendar, right? So you know that before the conference, you will have to maybe get in touch with some of the attendees. You will have to, check the speakers, maybe get in touch with them. If you have a booth, you know that you will have to prepare the design and so on and so forth, right? So once you know what you have to do, then you can also plan it on your calendar. Then you can prepare for your tasks. You need to keep a little bit of pace, meaning we need to use our time efficiently, meaning we should not be spending too much time on certain tasks and then with the risk of having too little for more important tasks, right? So we should always keep our pace. Now, one thing that helped me a lot, especially when I started the BD school, which was a new role for me, I never had a company before that, right? One thing that really helped me to really understand how I was using my time and whether to know if I was using it efficiently was actually to track myself. I use a tool which I will share later as well. But this tool, basically, I was tracking absolutely everything that I was doing in every day. And then I knew that, for example, sometimes I was spending a disproportionate amount of time on very trivial tasks, which I could have actually, honestly, I could have just avoided to do them altogether. They were so useless. They just didn't add any value that it was useless even to do them, right? But because I was doing those things, so wrong prioritization, I didn't manage to keep up with the pace, So at some point I was just lost. And just looking at how I was spending my time by tracking myself really helped me to become more conscious and more aware of how I use my time, and then become more efficient at allocating my time to all the tasks. And then finally, the last P of the time management wheel is, of course, persistence. Now, I always say this to all our students when they come to the certification program in the specific. I always say that business development is a long-term game. Now, in business development, you cannot let yourself not be persistent, not be resilient, because if you don't, you can quit already today, right? So nothing is going to happen over time. So you really need to be persistent, including with your time management, right? That means you need to persist in the activities that you're doing, but also whenever you're doing these boring tasks, I don't know, you have to build a list of contacts and you just need to find email addresses, right? I'm kidding. I do like to do that. But just because when I get into these very manual tasks, very repetitive, those type of tasks, they really keep me focused because there is basically no brain power required, right? It's very automatic and so on. And ideally, you want all your tasks to become like that, right? Obviously, realistically, not all the tasks can be automated, but the more you do something, the more automated it's going to be, right? Now, at the beginning, when we're talking about prioritization, I mentioned the example of organizing a webinar. Now, when we started in 2020 with webinars, it took us about a month to prepare. A month really to gather the information, prepare the slides, prepare the graphics, and so on. Now it takes us 4 hours to prepare a session like this, which hopefully it's value packed. I hope so. But in general, all the research and so on, it takes a lot less time. But it's just because we've been experienced, we gathered a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, so we actually know how to actually manage our time better. Now, the tasks or like these tactics, how can we manage our time better? Now, the first one is switch our priorities. Now, what does that mean? Now, if you asked me a couple of years ago, I would have told you that the best time management technique, which I actually followed for a very long time, was something called Eat That Frog. Now, the Eat That Frog is actually from a book from Brian Tracy. You can find a lot of videos online as well. I do find it useful. Now, the Eat That Frog, what it tells you is you should start your day with the most difficult task. Because if you do your most difficult task at the beginning, that's good, it's gone. And then you can just basically spend the rest of your day doing all the other things. And great, fair enough. But what happened to me was I did put all these tasks at the beginning of the day, but I really didn't enjoy doing those tasks. There were tasks that would really take away all my energy, all my motivation. In my case, it's prospecting. I don't like to that much. I don't like to be sending all these emails and so on. And it takes a lot of time. You have to find email addresses and so on. It's not my favorite part, let's say. And to do that, it cost me a lot of energy, time, and motivation. So after a long time, I also thought that, okay, but maybe this Eat That Frog, is not that, that efficient, right? What if instead we switch up the priorities? Instead of starting with the most difficult thing, the hardest thing for you and so on, what if you start with the easiest one? Now, if you start with the easiest task, you actually have some benefits, which is you get momentum, right? So you build momentum, you build confidence, you build motivation, and you can use these assets during your day to then tackle the most difficult ones. So instead of, one second. Yes, apologies. So instead of starting with the most difficult task, so eating that frog, what we can do is we can start from the easiest of the tasks. We build momentum, grow confidence, and then we tackle the next tasks. This is something we can do. We can switch our priorities, see how that goes, right? Again, these are not a magic wand or something like that. It is just something that you can try, but then again, you need to find your own time management technique. Now, the second one is tempered chunking. Actually, you will see that here, there are still my Eat That Frog, right? So they're still in the morning. I switched that up. I think this was at the beginning of September, and I just reviewed my calendar this week as I was working on the time management webinar. Now, basically, this time chunking means, so as we said before, when we're talking about the attention, one of the enemies of our attention, of keeping attention, is actually switching from a task to another, right? So context switching. When we're doing that, our brain just like fries, right? It's like, okay, too many different things. Like, I can't keep up, like slow down. Now, if we like to multitask, again, I like to multitask, or I like to think that I'm good at that, right? So if we like to multitask, then what we can do is simply just put tasks together that are similar, right? For example, again, in my example here, you can see there is call.reach, LinkedIn daily tasks, follow-ups, and proposal, and update our CRM. Now, for me, these are all sales tasks, right? So these are all tasks that I need to do if I want to get, if we want to get some clients, right? So it is important for us to do these tasks as well. But I want to group them together, because if I group them together, what happens is that my brain is like, okay, well, there are different tasks, but more or less similar. I can work with that. Thank you, right? So we make our brain more efficient. So you can identify similar tasks, you group them together, then you create time blocks with these similar tasks, and then you just go with it, you review, you adjust it, and so on. Now, one thing I did not do for a long time, which I realized, again, just this week, that as I was learning more about time management, that was really hindering my effectiveness, was not having reviewed my calendar for a very long time. So I had all these time blocks, all the things that I wanted to do and so on, but it was a very old organization. Now, the thing is, even just in the last 2 months, so many things have changed at the BD school. So this organization was just simply not effective anymore. So it is important that you review and adjust your strategies and your time management every now and then, really to readjust with the new priorities and so on. Now, number 3 is cognitive priming. Now, this can sound a little bit like abstract and so on, because it's all about giving our brain, the signals that everything we're going to do is going to be amazing, we're going to be focused, we're going to be effective, we're going to be productive, and we have to prime our brain to think that. Now, how do we do that? Well, first of all, by setting our intentions, or in more business terms, we can set our goals of the day, right? Personally, lately, and I will show you, this is how I organize my time now. So with a very nice task list, which I realize you can't really see, but it's on paper here. And what I do every day, I write down my list of tasks, right? Some people do it at night. Personally, I like to do it in the morning. That's where I'm more fresh and where I'm more able to decide what I want to do. So for me, these goals are maximum 5 goals a day. So I don't want to do crazy things, right? Because I also know that there will be probably something coming up during the day. So I want to make sure that I keep a little bit of buffer. But every day I start by saying, okay, this is all what I'm going to achieve today. You set your intentions, then you visualize yourself completing the tasks. Like personally, what I really love to do, and that's why I love the paper one, is to take the box. So every time I finish the task, that is my reward. I love to do that. Sometimes, okay, I'm guilty. I add tasks just so that I can tick the mark, I'm human, I like that too. So we visualize ourselves completing the task, we create a mental checklist, or in my case, a paper checklist, and then we can start with confidence our day. Now, I know that it sounds very abstract and it's like new age or this hippie or something like that, right? Which for some people, I reckon that this is not adapted for everyone. Personally, I don't even do that every day, right? Really visualizing myself completed tasks. There are some days in which I'm like, that's it. I don't want to do anything today. I don't know I'm going to get through the day, super honestly, like, some days are tougher, right? So it's not something that, maybe you're good and you do it every day. However, I did see the difference every time I woke up with a more positive outlook on what I was going to do and say, okay, today I'm going to smash my checklist. That's it. I'm done. And then I can go play tennis, it does change everything because you really put your brain into a more positive outlook on what you have to do. And therefore you're going to be more focused and eventually you're going to get through your task list more efficiently. So that is something, again, not for everyone, but as we said before, all of these things, they need to be tried and customized to your own style, or maybe none of them works for you. And then there's like plenty of techniques that we can use. Number 4 is the flow state maximization. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this concept, the concept of flow, but it's based on a book, which I will share you later, mostly because I can't pronounce his name. But this book is called Flow. And let's say the entire premise of the book is based on the fact that, sometimes, and I'm pretty sure, like, actually think about it, right? As I explain this concept, think about it. There are some days in which we are super productive. We're like the rock stars of business development. We can do so many things. Like we go through our task list in like 2 hours, and then we have still 6 hours or more, right? If you work more, to do more things. So like, okay, that's it. It's my day. I'm going to finish everything. And you're in this state in which like you're just entirely focused on that task only. You don't think about anything else. There is no distraction. Nothing that happens around you really gets into you. You're just immersed completely in the task. It's like if nothing else happens, right? Now, in my case, it happens a lot more when I play tennis than when I work, but that is something I should review. Maybe I should reread the book. Now, these concepts, so these states in which we're hyper-focused on one task, hyper-effective and so on, this author calls it the flow state. Now, the flow state is amazing when it happens, right? You really feel like a superhuman. It's like, oh, wow, I don't know how I managed to do all these things, right? So we need to make sure that we can make these moments more recurring, right? So that they happen more often. Now, how we can do that? We can do that by using a little bit of, let's say, self-awareness, right? So the first thing we need to do is to be a little bit more introspective and try to identify what are these triggers that make us so productive and they really make us enter in our flow state. For example, in my case, this is going to sound so stupid, I know, but in my case, what really helps me to enter in that flow state is by listening to 90s music. Now, when I'm listening to 90s music, I'm like, I don't exist. I do a lot of other random stuff, like I sing along, sometimes I move a little bit, like especially when there's Britney Spears or the Spice Girls, But I know that if I really want to focus, I can put that music on, it's going to lift me up, it's going to just like hyper focus me on these tasks. Now, that is one thing I notice, right? Now, your job is going to be to identify the same. And to do that, you can just think about that one time that you were really so focused and try to think back what it is that you were doing that helped you, Maybe for some people, it's really about like having absolute quiet and like a very sterile room with absolutely nothing around that can distract you. For some other people, it's the contrary. They love to go to cafes and then they love this energy of the place. And then that really helps them focus. You need to identify your triggers. Once you did that, try to create a dedicated workspace where you can recreate these conditions. You can establish some rituals, for example, right? So for example, in my case, it's this thing of the music, right? Because I know that that thing makes me focus. So then I just prepare myself, my headset, nice coffee, I start, and that's it, when I want to be really focused as well. Sometimes it's a decision. And then, of course, removing distractions. That is still very important because, as we said before, our attention span is decreasing more and more. I think at the moment is around 7 seconds or something like that, but I think it's going to lower even more. So maintaining or like structuring or like engineering your flow state can be a technique that maybe you can try out. And the last one is to use commitment devices. Now, back in 2020, I think, so I met a girl from Italy, Maria Chiara, she's called. She came to the training. And after that, we became friends. So we started talking, we would meet every week and so on. And our idea was exactly this, like, we need to feel like committed, we need to have like a buddy or someone that checks on us so that we make sure that if we say we're going to do X, Y, Z, we're actually going to do it. So we went super full on. We had a Trello board with all the tasks that we had to do. There was a list called Lucia, a list called Maria Chiara. Both of us had a lot of things to do and so on and so forth. Now, both of us were not very good with this accountability system because at some point we were just slacking off, we weren't really meeting on Zoom and so on. So we didn't really manage then to make it work. But again, right, it's about trial and error. But the commitment devices work exactly like that, right? You need to find that one thing that keeps you in check. Now, for me, it was, or at least we tried with Maria Chiara, right? We tried to have an accountability buddy. It didn't really work. We both had very busy life, right? However, one thing that I know works for me is if I share my goals. And the more publicly I do it, the more committed I feel, the more accountable I feel to actually do that thing. For example, we're launching a new course, it's going to start on November 10th. Then that course need to happen, right? Because at that point, I said to the entire world that I was going to do that. And I don't want to look bad in front of all these people. Maybe they don't care, right? So maybe nobody saw that and nobody cares, But I know I do feel accountable towards everyone that potentially could have read this post because I cannot look bad. Now I said I'm doing this, I have to do it. I have to put my face on it. Now, that is my way of, my device for commitment. Again, in your case, you can just think, what it is that will make you feel more accountable, and achieve your goals. It could be having a manager or a mentor that is really on top of your tasks and really help you to keep in check. I don't like that personally. I don't like to have someone checking on me every time. But it could also be just a good friend, or your partners, maybe you just want to have them, you ask them to keep an eye on you. But basically it's exactly this. So you need to set clear goals. That's the first thing. Once you set clear goals, you can share them with the people around you, with the buddy, with the friend, and so on, with the word. Then you have to set these check-in times, because otherwise you end up like Maria Chiara and I. And then, and this is important, you also should reward yourself for all these things that you do and reflect on what happened as well. Again, the reflection and the introspections is very important in time. I think in general, in life, it's important. But for time management, it's very important because sometimes we're just so caught up in the tasks that we have to do every day that we really stop thinking about like how did we do that, okay, great, but how did I do that, how did I manage to get this client, how did I manage to get all these views on this video, right? You don't know. If you never reflect, you actually can never re-engineer your success and make it more predictable, structured, and reliable as a process. Now, these were the 5 techniques, but, and these have been saying it from the beginning, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like potentially, you might also not have any time management tactic at all, because maybe you're just good with it. But what's the most important is that you just do what you say you're going to do, because at the end of the day, time management is about that, right? So if you decide that you're going to go for time blocks, for the Pomodoro technique, and so on and so forth, if you're not fully immersed in that task, if you're getting distracted, if you don't manage your attention, you're still not going to reach any target, right? And again, that's why it's, on one end, it's good that there are all these articles, videos, books on time management, but I think the risk is that we rely too much on these tactics, and that's not what I want you to do after following this webinar, right? I would like, and I hope that this webinar is just a way for you to think more about your time management, to try to identify your patterns, your triggers, and so on, and then craft your own time management style, right? But again, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You just have to do it. Now, this is, we're almost at the end. We have a Q&A session in case you have some questions at the end. But before that, I want to share some resources. Now, these are some books. The first one is Flow. As you can see, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi is very difficult to pronounce. However, the book is really good. It's really about like how you can enter in the state of flow. The other one is Atomic Habits, another very good one, especially if you like to build a routine, and if you really rely on routines and habits, or you simply want to, improve the way you work, the way you organize your time, and so on, you can read this book. On top of reading the book, I also suggest to read the blog of James Clear, because he has a lot of very good articles, and you can also follow him on LinkedIn. And then the last one is actually, I did not read it yet. It is on my reading list, and it's called Deep Work. In case someone of you read it already, you can give a little review in the chat, otherwise, and tell me if I should be reading it. But it is next on my reading list. And then a couple of tools as well that can be helpful. Now, the first one is FocusMate. Now, FocusMate is actually a network or a community, let's say, of buddies. So you will find a lot of Maria Chiaras and me there, but hopefully more effective than us at Buddy System. So basically, you can just like meet other people that share your same goals, same interests, and so on, and then you can just help each other out and share your goals, share your tasks, and make sure that you have someone that keeps you in check. The other tool is tomato timers. Now, I mentioned the Pomodoro technique here and there. Personally, I don't really like, I don't use it. I'm honest, I don't use the Pomodoro technique. I don't find it particularly helpful in my case, because sometimes there are some tasks that I particularly enjoy, and I don't need to have breaks in between. I just like to get to the bottom of that thing. So sometimes I can do 3-4 hours straight on the same thing, and I don't take breaks in between. So the Pomodoro technique is not my favorite one. But if you use it, then you can use a tool like this one that basically helps you to block out this time. There is a nice timer sound, and you can also block your screen and so on, so that you really stay stuck on that task, basically. And then The last tool is this one is called Toggle Track. This is the tool that I used for a long time to track myself and really making sure that I was, that I knew how I was spending my time. It's super convenient. It's you can integrate it with your calendar. So basically all the tasks that are on your calendar are going to appear there, and then you just start your task, and then it's going to categorize all your activities. So especially if you do like a type of business development, which is the real BD, so you do a lot of different things. Maybe you might have a little bit of more marketing related tasks, product development, sales, and so on. This can really help you identify where you're spending time, so that then you can adjust it accordingly and then make better use of your time. Now, that is it for today. As mentioned before, so we are the BD School. If you're interested in taking your skills to the next level, you can just check this link, thebdschool.com/courses. We have at the moment 7 active courses, 8 courses actually, but we also have coaching and a lot of other learning opportunities. So just go to check it and start growing your career. All right, now we can go to the Q&A sessions. Are there some questions? Maybe if you want, you can unmute yourselves or also just, you can also just say it in the chat. All right, that looks like no. So everyone, I hope that you enjoyed this webinar, that you found some value in this session. I hope that this really serves again as a, food for thought, and really just as a way to get deeper into that time management topic and really trying to find the best way for you to manage your time. Once again, like there's so many things, so you don't have to trust every single thing you find online. You have to find the thing that works for you. So I wish you all good luck with your business development tasks. And again, if you need anything, feel free to reach out to me. I will link my LinkedIn profile below. So hope to see you again on these channels. Otherwise, next webinars, LinkedIn, YouTube, you name it, the BD School is going to be there. So everyone, thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.